Hello everyone and welcome to Video Editing 1 with Professor Harris. I will be your guide. This is Avid Media Composer, MC101 Lesson 1, Introduction to Media Composer. This is a robust program. Top editors worldwide choose Media Composer as their go-to editing tool. Whether they're cutting breaking news, Hollywood blockbusters, or the next binge-worthy streaming series, Media Composer is the program of choice. As you expected, Media Composer offers a deep and complex toolset. So complex that they have two books, over 200 pages apiece, just to cover the fundamentals of the program. That should speak to how much this program can do. It can be a little bit overwhelming at first, but like I said, will be your guide. I'm here to break this down into easy to understand lessons as we go through this whole series. Media Composer can be surprisingly easy to start using if you have the right teacher, and I'm here to be that right teacher. Why am I doing this? Why am I making a video series? Well, this is external to my class at Franciscan University. That's Video Editing 1, COM 343. This is a resource that I want for my students. I want them to be able to watch back these lessons, these lectures, to understand the program as best as possible for infinite review. This is for your benefit. Hello, everyone. And then secondarily, to the people of the internet world, to the sphere, when I was getting my different certifications with Avid Media Composer, I saw that there was a distinct lack of media and video media surrounding these certifications and how to obtain them. And so I decided, you know what? Now that I am extremely proficient with the program, or at least more proficient than I was before, why don't I take the mantle and teach this to the people of the world, including my students? So here we are. This is what we're going to do. We're going to roll with it. In this lesson, we're going to learn how to navigate the application, customize the interface, and prep for editing by watching and organizing media clips. But what's the point of this? Why are we doing this? Why are we pursuing video editing? Well, it's this big thing right in front of you. This is the badge that we're going to be working towards this whole series for the MC101 and MC110. This is the Specialist Certified Video Editor with Avid Media Composer. There are two different badges that you can earn through Avid. We have the specialist and the professional. Now there is an expert, but they don't have expert certified for Media Composer, so we're just going to ignore that. Again, we're just focusing on Avid certified specialist for this series. That's MC101 and MC110. You can get this specialist certification. This is a badge that you get from Avid Media Composer that can go on your social media, including your LinkedIn, and it certifies you as a competent video editor with Avid Media Composer. Now, there are some video assets. Before we get into this, there's some pre-made projects by Avid, and you can download those off Edit Stock. I'm going to leave the link for this in the description of this video. It says 2022. It's currently 2023 or near the end, and you might be watching this in 2024, 2025. Avid Media Composer changes a little bit here and there with update to update, and it is becoming more efficient, more powerful, but it's not extremely different. The workflow is still much the same. So just download whichever is the most recent version of that media packet and just roll with it. And if you're with me in class, I'll talk you through all of this. It's not going to be that complicated or confusing. All right, so as you work towards your specialist certification at the end of the semester, you'll have an opportunity to take one exam. This one exam covers both fundamentals books. Yes, there are two books, again, to cover just the fundamentals of this program. But you'll have, I think it's a 50 question, and this could change, but it's a 50 question, 60-minute exam that covers, again, both books. So it'd be beneficial for you to be mastering the program as I teach it to you. Make sure you're working in the actual program. What is the program? Well, the things we're going to do in this lesson is learn how to launch it. I've already launched it because I have it in my dock. If you're going to launch it, all you have to do is navigate to where it is in your launch pad if you're on Mac, and then just click it, and that's going to launch Media Composer. Again, I already had it launched, so that's why it launched so quickly. But a few more goals for this lesson, and we're always going to start each lesson with the goals. We're going to identify the primary interface windows and understand their basic functions, recognize project assets in the bins, understand bin options, create user profiles, personalize the Media Composer interface, map user-selectable buttons, and change autosave setting intervals. Let's get into it. So here we are in Media Composer. This is the first window you're going to see once you launch up. This is the Select Project window, and it's got a bunch of different features that we're going to cover now. The first thing we're going to see is the Select Project button. We are currently selected, and by default, when you launch Media Composer, the Select Project button will be active. So this is where we can access existing projects or create new projects. Media Composer, again, launches this by default. Next, we have the What's New button. This is the What's New button, and this tabs us over to this page. This page essentially has a bunch of different details about updates, and we can click the different updates and be like, yes, wow, I'm a nerd. And then we can look at that stuff. It's pointless for beginners, so it's just good to know that that exists. But we'll go back to the Select Project window because that's where the money happens. We also have the OS user profile. This displays the name that you use to log in on the computer. That's this right here. It says, Welcome to Media Composer, Benjamin Harris, because that is my name. We also have the Projects tab. This is currently active, and this is active by default. And this tab shows us the different projects that are already on our system. So we can see I have this scroll wheel here. You can see all the different projects that I already have on my computer. Next, we have the New Project tab that's adjacent to the Projects tab. We have the New Project tab. We can activate this tab to set up and create new projects. Easy peasy. We also have the User Profile menu. I'm going to go back to Projects real quick. With the User Profile menu, this is a super cool feature. We can use this menu options to select, import, or create Media Composer user profiles. In Media Composer, you'll employ your user profiles to customize the application. So for going forward, just for your reference, this user profile drop-down tab, there are a lot of things when you customize the interface will be saved to your user profile. So it'd be good to, you can have multiples, but it would be good to be familiar with your user profile and the different settings that you have on each. And it's also nice because, like it said, we can create user profiles, import, or access our user profiles directly from this user profile drop-down tab. We also have the location menu. We use this menu to switch the project directory to displays in the project list. So what did I just say? The location menu is this. This location menu, we can switch between essentially private or public / shared documents on the computer's drive. So if I click this one, it shows me all of the different projects that are shared across multiple users on this computer. If I click this one, it's going to go to my private projects. Now, this is super important going forward for this semester that you never use the private one. You don't want to use the one that's sent to users, my user documents. You want to use the users shared Media Composer, and on PC, this is called users public, I believe. So make sure you're always using that public so that you can access the program from whichever user you're signed in on. Otherwise, you'll be locked out of it because these are set specifically to each specific user when you use the private location or the one that's stored in documents. Next, we have the Browse folder icon. That's next to our location drop-down tab because it's very similar in what it does. We can click this and it's going to open up this window where then we can pick a location, for instance, maybe like an external hard drive that we want to work off of for our project. So we can store our projects on external hard drives and work directly from there with this. So this lets us select custom locations for new projects or navigate to existing projects in custom locations. Easy peasy. All right. Number 9, we have the project list. This displays a list of projects in the current location menu directory plus information about each project. So like here we are here, we're set on our shared projects and we can see this list. We have our different projects. They all appear here. We got Rock Climber, MC110TN Parkour, Anesthesia, Jacuzzi Harris, Anesthesia L2. So we've got a bunch of different projects here. And these, when you create a new project, it will appear in this list as long as the location menu is set correctly. And then number 10, we have the project view. We can leverage these options to adjust the project's list appearance, including which information columns we want to display. And that is all of this stuff right here, where we can kind of zoom in and out to change what kind of different columns we see. We can select different views. So this is frame view. We can also set font and choose columns that will be displayed in the different views. So let's say, for instance, I wanted something further down. So we could say modified date. We could move that up and customize this area as we see fit. But right now we have name by default and frame and project type and frame rate. That's all the basic information you're going to see just off the rip. During the first exercise, if you haven't done that already, so there are exercises at different intervals within the lessons, and in the first lesson, it covers the select project window to create user profiles and open a project installed during the MC101 overview lesson. That's essentially how to set up that download I was talking about earlier onto your system. I'm not going to cover that in this video. For my students, I do cover that in class, so no worries there. I will eventually make a video on it. I might have already made a video on it, and you can go ahead and check my channel for that. Look for that. It should be called something along the lines of how to work off of a USB or on the computer's hard drive. So there you go. There's that for that reference. Now that you've explored the select project window, you're ready to dive into the main editing interface. But first, let's take a quick look at how to use the What's New interface and how to open a project. So when we click the What's New tab, going back here to the Nerd settings, you can gain access to a list of Media Composer's release dating back to different versions. I mean, like I said earlier, this goes back to 2019.6. But not only can you review the update details from past releases, but you can quickly research available features if you're working on a system with an earlier version installed. So if you wanted to, you're like, oh, I'm in 2020.4, I can see what features are available in this version. To access the information about specific releases and its feature updates, we can click the versions menu icon that reveals the release date, and then we can click the eye icon on these different little guys, so we can see these little icons, and that's going to pull up the different Avid websites, and then we can see different information about those things specifically. Very cool. Thank you, Avid. All right, moving along here swiftly. Since the select project window always loads after Media Composer launches, by default, you'll have plenty of opportunities to explore and master its interface. So since the select project window, this is going to open every time. We'll have plenty of time to master this. All right, now let's swiftly move on to opening a project. You'll open projects from the select project window. To open a project, we're going to select the project's location via the location menu. So whether we're working in our private folder or our public shared folders, then we're going to select the project that we want to open. We can click Rock Climber once because Rock Climber is what we're going to be working with for this lesson. And then we can click the Open button or press Enter on our Windows or Mac return on our keyboard. Additionally, you could just double click it. So there's 3 ways to open it. Double click, click it once, hit Enter, or click it and then come down here and hit Open. So that's 3 different ways. All right, moving on to learning the interface. To make starting and working with projects easier, you'll want to familiarize yourself with the main application windows. Let's start with a quick tour. As you go, pay close attention to the names of the windows and buttons. The quicker you recognize them, the less confusing things will seem, and the faster you'll get up and running. So, we have our 3 main windows, our 3 main interfaces. So, when the project opens, the 3 primary windows in Media Composer interface appear. We have the bin container. This is the bin container window. Next, we have the composer window. This is the composer window. It consists of both these screens in this squarish area. And then we have the timeline. Timeline down here. So again, we have bin container, composer window, and timeline. Easy enough. So the 3 primary windows are interlocked when using a single computer screen, as you can see on my screen here. On dual displays, by default, the composer window and timeline windows occupy the right screen while the bin container occupies the left screen. So this screen and this window and this window go to a right screen over here, and this window occupies its own left screen window. That's for your reference. All right. First, we'll start with the bin container. 2 sides make up the bin container. We have this side and this side. This whole square area makes up the bin container. The bin container sidebar left, that's this left side, lists project elements like bins, volumes, scripts, and folders. The right panel displays open bin, volume, and script contents. So these are our different folders and bins, and the right side actually shows us what's inside. This is very similar to like Finder windows. So I come into Finder here and I go to, let's say, desktop, and then I double click. I don't know, maybe none of those. I'll go to music. Then I click here. We can see that this kind of expands into this, and we can see the folders and the contents of this folder. It's very similar here in Media Composer. You could just double click, and that's going to open the different contents of each bin. All right, moving on, we have the Composer window. By default, the Composer window displays two monitors and two different windows. So you'll load and play source media in the source monitor, which is the left, and you'll use the record monitor, which is the right, to view your editing program sequence. Let me talk with English. I'm going to use English here. So we're going to load clips before they actually go in our timeline, before they actually end up in our final composite. We're going to load them to preview them here. And then once we're satisfied with what we want, we could add this video to our timeline, and our timeline displays here. So we can see what we change, what happens in our timeline in our record monitor, whereas we can see what we're previewing from other media in our source monitor. That's a simple way to understand it. And then during the editing process, the Composer window will change to show you different images, 2, 3, 4, and 6 at a time, depending on what you need to see while performing particular operations. This includes editing, trimming, visual effects, and so on. So these two screens are going to turn into 6 screens at one point this semester during this video series. Buckle up, it's okay. I'll explain it. I'll make sure it's nice and simple in terms, but all you need to know right now, and one of the big things you need to know just going forward, is that, again, this right screen displays everything that happens in our timeline. This is the actual output of our video project. All right, then the last thing we need to know is the timeline. The timeline displays a graphical representation of your program organized into tracks. The image, what you can see here on screen, contains a fairly basic sequence. So this is kind of what a sequence is going to look like. It's not going to have these gaps in it. I've been goofing around with these, so you could just ignore all the different flaws that are in these. But this is what a basic sequence might look like. Initially, your timeline will be empty because no sequence will be loaded. What is a sequence? A sequence is a series of different clips or shots or segments that are arranged to make a final output video in your record monitor. But let's keep moving. We're going to move on now to opening and closing bins. As mentioned, the bin container, remember this is our bin container window, very nice. Bin container contains bins, which are container files that hold project assets. Remember that word. Assets, project assets. So our bins, so we have video, we have titles, effects, audio. These hold our project assets. So this video here and this video here are assets that I'm loading in my source monitor to then figure out, what of this do I want to take to put into my timeline. And once it's in my timeline, it shows up in my record monitor. All right, I hope that makes sense. I'm going to undo that because I don't actually want that to happen. But that's a quick overview. But opening and closing bins. So we'll take a closer look at this now. During the first exercise and throughout the editing process, you'll open and close bins. To open a bin from the container sidebar, we can double click the bin. I've been doing this multiple times already. So I'm going to open my effects bin. So I've got a dissolve, an Avid Titler Plus, and a lower third graphic. This is my effects bin. So I double clicked it, and that's how it opened. And then if we want to, we can open additional bins by double clicking the bin icons multiple times on different bins in our bin container sidebar. So I have a bunch of different bins open, and they display up here as tabs. You can't really read them because I've got so many of them open, so I'm going to close a few of these, close my subclips. And we have our sequence bin, video bin, and titles. So now we have a couple bins open, but not all. We can see the icons here change depending on which ones are actually open. So you can see this titles bin is open, and this video bin is open because they are open here in my different tabs inside my bin container window. Easy peasy. Now, to close bins, I'm sure you just saw what I did, but you can just click the little X's in the upper right corner. So if I want to close my titles tab or my titles bin, I could just click the little X, and that's going to close that. Super easy. We can also close primary windows if we want. So each of the 3 primary windows has a vertical title bar on the left side. If you click the X, that's this. If we click the X, then it's going to close that window. So let's go ahead and let's close our composer window. So if I close this, what's going to happen? Nothing, apparently. Let me close the timeline instead. I'll close the timeline. So now I don't have a timeline. How am I supposed to edit without a timeline? Well, this is where Media Composer, if you click one button, it can feel like you broke the whole thing and you can have no idea how to fix it. But there's a quick way to reopen closed windows and to restore the default view. We can click the menu icon to the edit button in the workspace bar. This is the workspace bar. And there's this little arrow at the bottom of our edit, because this is the workspace we're currently in. We can click this and we can do restore current to default. And then we can hit restore, and that's going to bring back our timeline. So if you ever accidentally close your timeline, your composer window, and you're like, oh, I can't edit anymore, you can always restore it, restore current to default. So that's a very easy way to get that back. Awesome. And then a couple of notes here. Closing windows does not cause you to lose work. When you reopen the window, you'll see your work again intact. So don't worry about accidentally closing your timeline. That doesn't mean you lost all your work. It just means that the interface looks different. And then closing the bin container causes all open bins to close and all clips or sequences displayed in the composer and timeline windows to close as well. So what does that mean? Essentially, if I closed my bins window right now, it would close this, and it would make this blank, and all of this would also disappear or go blank. But that didn't mean that I lost any work. It just meant that I closed essentially my bins that were being used for my timeline and my composer window. All right, let's move on now. Creating and changing user profiles. In Media Composer, you can adjust numerous settings to suit your personal style and editing needs. These adjustments are stored within your user profile. In addition, you can create multiple user profiles and switch between them without having to switch system users at the operating system level. If you launch Media Composer and work inside a project without creating a user profile, you'll likely work with the default profile, named after the system's login name. So Media Composer auto creates this during the initial launch. So if you don't set up a user profile, for instance, we saw that my name earlier at the operating system level was Benjamin Harris, so it would by default make a Benjamin Harris created user profile when working with Avid. But let's explore how to create your own user profile. So as you work with Media Composer, you'll quickly discover that you get to choose between multiple ways to accomplish particular tasks. For user profiles, this means choosing when you create one. You can do this either before you open a project at the select project window. Remember that first window that we opened? I was showing you the create user profile or the user profile drop down. You could create one there, or after you open the project in the main interface. So we could make one here as well. The next 2 subsections explain how to do this. So to create a user profile within an open project where we are currently, if you open a project before creating a user profile, you can use the settings window to set one up. So first we're going to access our user profile options by going to File in the upper left and then Settings. And then in the settings, we can click the User tab. And here on the User tab, we can find the active user at the top of this tab. You can see it right here. I'm currently set at B. Harris. The default user was Benjamin Harris, which I was just explaining a little bit ago. User profile is a menu you can use to create your profile. To do this, we'll click the User Profile drop-down menu, and we can go to Create User Profile. We'll choose Create User Profile, and then we can type in our profile name. So we could call this, I'm just going to call this Lesson 1. Cool. So now I have a user profile named Lesson 1. It's going to load for a second. It's going to change some settings, and it's going to load up our new user profile. Did you notice how the timeline changed? It got a little bit squishier, a little bit skinnier. That's because on the B. Harris user that I had open just a second ago, had settings to make these wider and chunkier. And that's one example of different settings you can leave behind on different user profiles. So if I wanted to see this bigger or smaller, I could set that in my user profile and it would be saved to my user profile. All right, now let's talk about creating a user profile in the Select Project window. To quickly get back to the Select Project window, we're going to want to make sure we save any progress that we made here in our project. So we'll click our bin container on our bin container sidebar, and we'll hit Command S or Control S on our keyboard. Then we'll come up to File, and we can go to Close Project. It's going to take a little second here, but it's going to close the project and take us right back to the Select Project window. We are back on the Select Project window, and remember the User Profile dropdown. We can see we're currently set on Lesson 1. There's my B. Harris profile, but we could also create a user profile by selecting here, putting in a name, and then clicking OK. I'm going to refrain from doing that, and I'm going to jump right back into our project because I don't need to create another user profile. I just showed you how to do it. Any changes you make to the editing interface get saved to the active user profile. A file Media Composer automatically saves to the computer's internal drive. When you're ready, you can copy and take this file to another system. So if I had a highly customized setup, so let's say I rearranged all these tiny little buttons here, I made this smaller, I decided, you know what, I like to see more up here and less down here. It's going to save all of that to my user profile. I can take that user profile folder, load it on a different computer, relaunch, load my user profile, and all of these weird, wacky settings I just did are going to be saved on that user profile, and I can continue editing like I never left the first computer. All right, so that's just a little bit on user profiles. As you get more advanced with the program, as your skill level increases, you're going to want to customize the interface. And I'll say this now, and I'm going to say this again multiple times, that if you're not customizing your interface, you're stagnant in your editing. The point of video editing is to constantly be getting faster and more efficient. And if your interface isn't changing to some degree, if you're not remapping and rearranging buttons, then you're stagnant in your editing process. Never stop improving. All right, let's move on now to working with bins. In Media Composer, a bin is a container file that holds your project's assets. Remember I said this earlier? Here's our video bin. It has our different project's assets. It's got these different videos that we can load by double clicking into our source monitor and then review the footage and figure out, what from this do we like, what can we use, what can we add to our timeline, which will then show up in our record monitor. Okay. So you'll store all your assets in bins: audio and video source clips, subclips, sequences, titles, effects, graphics, everything. Everything you make is going to be stored in what's called bins. Every new project includes one default bin named after the project itself. I deleted that because I'm working with. It's not here. If it was here, it would be named Rock Climber, but there would be a bin named Rock Climber. I could make a new bin if I wanted to. I could do Command N, or I could right click and click new bin, and I could, by default, it's going to name it Rock Climber bin. So I'll just leave it. I'll leave it named that. So now we have a bin called Rock Climber bin in our list here. So that, and you can put bins into folders to further organize the project. So we have a folder here. It's named Rushes, and it's got my audio, my effects, my titles, and my video bins inside a folder. So if I wanted to, I could create a new folder. I could name this folder, I don't know, something like project, and then I could throw all of my assets, my different bins inside of that project folder. I'll refrain from doing that, and I'm going to actually delete this. I can select the folder and hit delete on my keyboard, and that makes a new trash. It goes into the trash. We could recover this from the trash later if we wanted to. I'm over explaining this, but I'm going to keep going. Okay, because you must place all project assets into bins, you'll constantly use them as you edit. So let's preview some basic bin features and controls. So changing bin views is the first thing we're going to cover. So I'm going to open back up my video bin here, and we're going to look at the different bin views. Quick note before we jump into the different bin views, if you can't see these icons, there's a chance that the window was shrunk down enough to the point that you need to use this little drop down. So you can still access those different views by using that little drop down feature. All right, now that we previewed the bins and kind of the different bins and the way they look and the way they function, let's look at how to change the different views here. Again, I talked about looking at the different views. So right now, this is the default view. This displays bin contents as columns of information. Think of this as text view because this is called text view, and this is a database sort of mode. So we're currently set on text view, that's this one here. And if I scroll left and right, we can see I have different columns of information that I can scrub through. We have duration, FPS, what else do we got? Drive, which drive it's stored on, the creation date, the image size, all kinds of other things that can help us determine what it is about these different clips that we might be interested in. So that's text view. Media Composer automatically tracks basic statistical information about clips and sequences. This includes duration, timecode, source, and so on. Camera written metadata is preserved and tracked in columns that you can display yourself. There's a way to customize this. We're going to get more into that in the second book, the MC110. But for now, we can also create custom columns and show additional information about our different assets in our bins. So again, that's all MC110 stuff. But for now, just know that there are different things that you can include and custom columns that you can add to this section in our text view. As I've been navigating the different little bins here with the different assets, did you notice the different icons for the different things? Well, Media Composer wants you to take a second to look at them here in this screenshot and identify them for yourself. What do you think each of these little icons on the left side represents? So let's see if you can guess these correctly. So the first one is an audio only source clip. So this looks like a little short audio waveform, and that's the icon for that. So we've got little audio. These are audio assets in our bin. Next, we have video source clip icon. This resembles a single frame of film, right? So we've got a little frame of film. That's the icon for that. And then next we have the sequence icon, and this looks like a film strip. It looks like it's got a bunch of these little film segments in it because it is. It does have a bunch of little film segments in it. That's what makes it a sequence. So as you go through this course, you'll work on projects. You'll instantly recognize these icons and others going forward. Like I said, in lesson 2, we're going to cover some more of those and how those look. But for now, these are the 3 essential basic ones: audio, video, and then the sequence, which contains both the audio and video segments. Sweet. All right, next, let's look at the other different view here for our bins. We have frame view. So if I click frame view here, you'll see that the representative frame for each item in the bin appears. So now we have like these little images. Let's go to our video bin because it's going to be a lot more interesting to look at this with frame view. And we can see a bunch of little thumbnails or pictures to each video that represent the content of that video. This view simulates working with shots on a light table and lets you easily enlarge, preview, and rearrange your shots. Because most editors are visually oriented, this can be a really nice way to work. So we can be scrolling back and forth and checking these bad boys out as we see fit. But yes, this is a frame view. A little bit more on frame view. To make the frames larger or smaller in our bin here, we can click and drag the frame size slider highlighted in the here on screen. Actually, it's not appearing right now, which is fascinating. I don't know why it's not. It should be there. Oh, there it is. Okay, now it's appeared. So we can use this to zoom in and out and be able to see these little thumbnails or little frames a lot more easily. Or you can use the corresponding keyboard shortcuts. Now, these keyboard shortcuts that I'm about to tell you about, they have a lot of functions in Media Composer, and I think it's going to talk about it here in a second. But just to let you know, these are Control L or Command L and Control K or Command K, depending on your operating system. But if I select one of these and hit Command L, it's going to make it larger. If I hit Command K, it's going to make it smaller. And this function works on a lot of things in Media Composer, the increasing and decreasing of the size of things. So for your reference going forward, do remember those shortcuts. So if you prefer, you can also adjust frame size by going to the Edit menu and choosing Enlarge Frames or Reduce Frames. That's another way we can do this. But Control L and Control K or Command L and Command K are universal keyboard shortcuts in Media Composer. Depending on which window is active, they also affect the timeline track height or composer window zoom level. So there are different things we can use this for. To remember them, you can think of L for large or K for kleiner. I don't speak German, but this is the German word for smaller. Or we can just remember the K key is next to the L key. So L makes it larger, K makes it smaller. All right, we can also change the representative frames. That's another cool thing that we can do here in frame view. So by default, a bin displays a clip or sequence's first frame when in frame view. In the television environment, this first frame may be color bars or just video black. So there might not be anything at the beginning of our video clips here, and we might need to change the representative frames to help us identify what is the actual content of this video. So we can change the representative frames by doing the following. We can preview the clips and then change the representative frames. So we can single click the clip or sequence frame to select it to start. So we'll select this once, and then we can do any one of the following things to change this representative frame for this shot. I'm going to zoom up just a little bit so we can see it a little bit better. We could click it once and then hit the space bar or 5 key to play through the clip, and then hit space bar or the 5 key again to pause. So if I hit space bar right now, I can't do it because I'm currently recording, I'm screen recording, and my computer's not powerful enough to do both things at once. But trust me on this one, if I hit space bar and I wasn't recording, this clip would play through right here in the frame view, and I could hit space bar again, and that would pause it on the frame that I wanted. We could also press the step forward or step backward keys on our keyboard to step through the clip. By default, these are the 1, 2, 3, 4 keys. We could also press 1 and 2 keys to move in and multi-frame increments, and 3 and 4 to move in one frame forward or backward at a time. So if I hit 1 and 2, we can see I'm jumping forward pretty significant. If I hold it, it almost plays through. If I hold 1, it'll go backwards in time. Same thing with 3, it'll go backwards frame by frame, or 4 will go forwards frame by frame. So there's that. And then the third way we can do this is on a full-sized keyboard, we can press the home key to set the first frame in the clip to be the representative frame, or the end key to see the last frame to set that as the representative frame. So those are 3 quick ways that we can click on these videos and we can kind of like scrub through them and change their representative frames so we can tell what is this shot about. Cool. All right, optionally, we could press Control S or Command S to save our changes to our bin. So let's say I change the representative frames on these shots. I said, okay, this frame here is perfect. I can then hit Command S, and that's going to save the fact that I've made this adjustment to that representative frame. All right, now let's move on to rearranging clips and tidying up the frame view display. So you can group smaller shots together or plan out the edit as a virtual storyboard by rearranging these shots directly here in our frame view. So I could say, I want to make a scripted story, so I'm going to use this as if it's a storyboard. I'm going to rearrange my shots here in my view to make sense when I'm actually adding it to my project. But when you resize frames and rearrange shots, clips often end up outside of the bin's viewable area or overlap each other. So I could accidentally overlap video, or as we can see, I got to scroll left and right to even see all the videos. So there's a way to make this more efficient. So you can easily tidy up the arrangement by doing the following. We can go to Bin, Align, and Fill. So we come up here to Bin, we go to Align and Fill, and then we can Fill Window to arrange the clips to the designated area. So if I hit Fill Window, you can see, boom, it snaps all the videos into a nice arranged format. We can also arrange the clips to a grid pattern as wide as our current window, that's included. That's included with the fill window. We can also go to bin. We could do align and fill sorted. This is the same as choosing fill window, except Media Composer arranges the clips in the same order as listed in text view. So if I go to bin, align and fill, we go to fill sorted, then it's going to arrange it in the order that it would appear in text view. So easy peasy there. If all the clips in your bin don't fit within the view, you can scroll vertically to see the others. Each use the scroll wheel. Either you can use the scroll wheel on your mouse, or you can just scroll with your fingers on your touchpad. So I got my mouse here. I can scroll it. Easy peasy. All right. Quick note here from Avid. If you're rearranging clips into groups, for example, grouping shots with visual similarities, we can go to Bin, Align and Fill, and Align to Grid. This aligns grouped shots to the same visible grid with invisible grid, without reordering them or significantly changing their location. And swiftly moving on here, we're going to get now into Script View. Script View is this guy here. So Script View button displays a bin's contents as a combination of the text view and the frame view with an added comments field. So you can type anything that you like into the comments field, but typically you'll use this field to log notes and keywords. So for instance, in this shot, this guy's like, I hate you, you're my worst enemy. We can put that information into our script view, and then boom, it's saved in our script view. So now we can see not only the representative frame for the shot, which we can also adjust here too. If I hit 1, 2, 3, and 4, we can see I can adjust the representative frame. I can also zoom in and out, but I have that nice little text area as well. You can also put, like it said, little notes. So I could say, this shot needs to be color corrected. I could add all kinds of different notes directly in script view, which is super efficient and really helps later when you're trying to find things. We'll go into more about finding stuff. I don't know if it's later in this book or in the second book, but we can essentially type in notes and then use those notes to find shots later. A few notes about script view though before we move on is that the comments you create here automatically appear in text view's comment column. So I hate in, and I go to text view. I can see if I find that shot and I scroll over to the right and go to comments, you can see that's there as well. I hate whatever. So that does appear here in the comments section. Second thing is script view displays the same column arrangement as the last active bin view. And then third thing is you can use the same method as frame view to change the representative frame. I already said that. In a moment, you'll work with the bin features covered in this section, but first, let's go over key features you'll use throughout the editing process. So we have Essential Tool, the Fast menu. This is the Fast menu. It's going to be on like almost all the little windows. You have fast menus where you can perform quick functions by clicking these little two bars. These are fast menus. So many windows and tools contain a button that reveals menu options when you click it. It's shown on my screen here, like I just showed you. This is the fast menu. Each one contains different options, but the icons remain the same. For example, if you click the bin's fast menu, you'll reveal commands like fill and fill sorted that we wouldn't see if we clicked the timeline. So I can do quick actions here for fill. We can also do align, snap to grid, all kinds of different things that we would be able to do in our normal menus as well. They're just directly here in our fast menu. Now it's funny, it calls it a fast menu when there's 300 options here, but trust me, this is a fast menu and you will learn how to use it as we keep moving here with Media Composer. Moving on to personalizing the application. As mentioned in previous sections, you can adjust Media Composer's appearance and functionality to suit your style and needs. This includes window and tool arrangements, button visibility, placement, and keyboard shortcuts, and so much more. This section covers how to use workspaces, customize how bins display, adjust interface setting options, and map functions to the interface and keyboard. You'll save all these preferences to your user profile, and that's not something you actively have to do. Again, that's just a passive thing. So if I scrub this over just slightly, that's going to be saved to my user profile. If I rearrange some of these buttons, that's going to be saved to my user profile automatically. So Media Composer makes that part at least incredibly easy. If you're new to Media Composer and you're not ready to personalize your setup yet, no worries. As you work through lessons 2 and through 12 and other projects, this will change. You're going to get more comfortable with it. But the book recommends that bookmarking this section so that you can quickly return here and use this as a guide when you're ready to start customizing your interface. All right, so we'll start with using workspaces. The first and perhaps most obvious way to customize Media Composer is to rearrange the windows depending on your preferences, screen size, and even the task at hand. You may wish to resize them as well. So, Media Composer includes several pre-designed workspaces to get you started, one for each stage of the editing process. When active, each workspace displays a specific window arrangement and relevant tools. You can activate this pre-configured workspace via the workspace bar or by going to Windows Workspaces. This is the workspace bar here on the right side of the screen. We can also go to Windows Workspaces and we have those same different options here. But this is our workspace bar. You can activate the pre-configured workspace via the workspace bar or, like I said, by going to Workspaces. As you may have guessed, you can adjust each workspace to your liking. So we have editing, color, effects, and audio, and I'm going to go through each one now with you. So to customize a workspace, we can click the button in the workspace bar for the workspace that we want to customize. Alternatively, we could go to Windows, Workspace, Workspace Name. And then we can arrange and add and remove windows as we see fit or as we want. So choosing Windows, Workspace, Save Current, or click the menu icon to the workspace bar and choose Save Current. So thanks, very cool. It's not really telling us much. It's just telling us that we have different options. We can add different tools. I could go to tools. It could be like, I want the audio EQ tool for some reason with my color, and I can pick a destination to drop this, and then I could save this custom setup, including the audio EQ tool in my color workspace. This all sounds super confusing. I'm just going to close it. So what it's saying is that we can save, we can rearrange and set up, we can make small adjustments, and we can click this little area and we can hit Save Current, and that's going to save this workspace. So I want to go to color and I come back to effects. It's going to save that little parameter adjustment I made. So Media Composer is just saying there are ways to customize the interface to your liking and ways to save it manually or ways to restore it if you want. You can restore current to default, you can restore it to save, or you could save whatever format you have currently. So thanks, Media Composer. So what changes are saved to our workspace? Save changes include bin container, composer, and timeline window size and placement, as well as the presence and location of any tools. Media Composer tracks workspace updates. This means that you can seamlessly switch from editing workspace to another workspace and then back. And when you come back to that workspace, let's say from back to the editing workspace, Media Composer returns the windows and tool arrangement to the workspace most recent configurations. You can restore an active workspace to its last saved version or reset it by clicking the menu icon next to the workspace and selecting either restore to saved or restore current to default. When you choose the restore current to default, the following dialog box appears. So we'll click restore current to default, and we're going to get this little dialog box. It's going to ask us if we're sure we want to restore, restore workspace view settings to defaults, and we can just hit restore, and it's going to restore it. So Media Composer trying to protect you from losing a custom arrangement if you had one set up. All right. Now, let's look at customizing how bins display. But first, we're going to go back to our edit workspace. The edit workspace is your bread and butter. This is where you're going to spend 90% of your time because, and this is an obvious thing, but I'm going to say this just out loud for you. When you work on a project and you're editing, you always start with the story. The story comes first. You want the story to be flawless. Then you make it pretty. You come into color, you make your adjustments in color, and then you add your special effects. Also, audio is important. I'm not saying audio is not important, but you always start with the story and then you move into making it pretty. Okay? So always start with the editing process. All right, customizing how bins display. Besides customizing the workspace, you can change how bins display to accommodate your setup. As you've experienced, bins open as tabs in the bin container. This saves space, especially when working on single display system. So I have a single display system. We have our different bins open here, and it's saving space by being able to tab between these. Otherwise, they'd be out, and I'd have a bunch of different windows and areas, and it just would take up too much space. This is why when you're on a 2-monitor display, the bin container window is its own separate thing. It goes on the left monitor, whereas all of this ends up on the right monitor. So if you have a 2-monitor display, good for you. You're cool. All right, let's look at 2 ways you can customize bin layouts to suit your style and needs. First, we're going to organize bins into separate subdivided panels in the bin container's right panel. To do so, and to do this, we can click an Open Bins tab and then drag it into a green eligible edge and drop it. What did I just say? So what I'm saying is, if I wanted, let me close some of these real quick. I'm going to close audio. All right, so we have our rock climber bin and our sequences bin. If I wanted my rock climber bin open but kind of separate, I can click and grab this tab and pull it out until I see an available green edge. Once the screen turns white, I know I can let go. And now I have my very own separate, oh, now it's floating. I didn't mean to do that. Hold on, go back. There. All right, so now I have them stacked. Let me start up. Let me do that again because I'm sure you're confused. And I just closed my sequences bin, which closed my whole project. Let me just relaunch one of these. We'll do that one. Okay, so if I wanted to make this its own bin, I could come down here, go to the bottom. We can see now I have my own. Come on, give me the scroll. Now I have them stacked. I have my sequences on top of my rock climber. Now what I could do is select my rock climber, and then I could open another bin, and that's going to open my effects bin down here. So I have my rock climber bin and my effects bin open. I could come back up to sequences, select that one, open titles. Now I have titles and sequences here. You can see how customizing this would help with your editing process because you can essentially arrange it to your liking. So you can keep similar information together. So maybe I could keep my audio and my video separate by opening my bins onto different layers. And you can do this over and over and over again as many times as you like. So that's a cool feature there. But the big thing to take away here, and something Avid's going to test you on, is that when you grab this tab and you drag it away, you got to look for one of these eligible green spaces and then let go, and then you're going to get the option to drag this down and customize it. So keep that in mind. What if you wanted to have one of these bins as its own kind of floating window? Well, I could open a different bin. So let's open our video bin, and then I could drag it a short distance, but not to the white, and then let go, and we can see now I have my own floating whole individual bin window for my video clips, and I can double click these and load these into my source monitor. But that's an option as well if you're looking to make a floating window that's separate. Let's say I had like a 3 or 4 monitor display. I could be doing this and making all kinds of different specific bin floating windows. Cool. All right. So if you'd like to open and close bins into separate floating bin container, you can either right-click the bins icon and choose Open Selected Bins in one window, or you can hold the Control or Command key in Mac and double-click the bins icon. So I could hold Command and double-click Titles here. Now it would also open this as its own floating window. So you have options. There's multiple different ways to do the same things in Avid Media Composer. Okay, once open, you can drag the floating bin container anywhere you want. That's kind of obvious. And you can allocate more space to a bin by dragging the bin container divider line to the left, and you can even drag and conceal the left panel. So if we wanted to, we could just conceal this entirely. I don't know why you'd want to do that. You'd want to be able to see these so you can open them. But if you wanted to, you can completely cover it up. As you can see, you can customize the bin container and how bins display as you see fit. Plus, these adjustments are persist when you switch to other workspaces or reset workspaces to default. In the next exercise, you're going to practice how to do this. So good luck on that if you go do the exercise. But first, let's explore a few more ways you can customize the interface. By the way, when you close a project, Media Composer remembers a bin's location and reopens the project with the bin in that location. All right. So yeah, if you want to keep moving on to the next exercise, you can. But first, let's explore a few more ways you can customize the interface. And this starts by adjusting the interface settings. By default, Media Composer's color scheme is dark gray with light gray highlights. You can change the overall interface brightness and highlight color. To do this, we can go to File, Settings, and then the Settings window, we can go to User tab. Where's my mouse? There we go. File, Settings, and we go to the User tab, and we can double-click the interface settings. So I'm going to shrink some of these so that I can find the interface settings more easily. Where's interface? There we go. Double-click interface. That's going to pull up this window here. All right. And then in the General tab, we can click the tile to choose the interface brightness or highlight color option. So here we are in our General tab. We can have the interface brightness. We can turn this up and down. Or we can go to the highlight color, and we can select between purple, blue, orange, and white. So we have options here. I'm going to switch it to, no, I should leave it white. I'm pretty basic. I like it dark. and I like it white. I like it dark and bright. I am a video editor, so I like the darkness. We can click apply to preview the changes or click OK to accept the changes. So if I hit apply here, we can see I didn't make any change. Let me hit apply now. There. Now we can see some change. We saw a little bit of purple, a little bit of life come to this project. It's not really doing much, but it does do stuff. So for your reference, that does work. We can apply, or we can hit OK to apply and save those changes. Let's look at one more interface setting that can affect how the workspace customization we explored earlier works. So when switching between workspaces, you can control how the workspace loads. Just set when moving to a workspace interface setting to either load last known state, which is default, or load last saved state. So when moving to a workspace, we need to load last saved state or last known state, and that can be nice when you're trying to switch between stuff on the fly. All right. If you're having trouble reading the user interface, you can improve text legibility by changing the Windows font and or size. To do this, we could select the Windows set font, and in the font dialog box, select the font and type a point size. I'm not an old person yet, so I'm going to just keep it at default here. All right, mapping functions to the interface and keyboard. Many essential functions include ones covered in this course don't appear by default on the keyboard or interface. And this is kind of dumb. So let me just close that real quick. So what did it just say? It just said many of the buttons that you're going to use on your interface aren't mapped by default. And that's kind of silly, but I think Media Composer is trying to force you to learn how to do this, which I guess is fine, but it would be nice if it could just say, hey, this is how you do this, by the way. Anyway, but most editing professionals used highly customized settings. In time, you will too, but for now, let's explore some basic customization. So to change buttons, you'll open the command palette. To change the keyboard mapping, you'll call up the keyboard palette. So understanding the command palette. You can access the command palette from the tools menu. So we can go to tools, then we can go to command palette. I'm always blind. I can never see these things. There we go, command palette. A quick shortcut for this on the keyboard is Command 3. I think it's Control 3 on Windows. So this is our command palette. And get familiar with this. See this? This is your best friend now. You are going to learn to use this a lot over the course of these coming lessons. If you click the category tabs listed across the top, you can find the palette contains every user selectable button included in Media Composer. So if we go through these different tabs, we can see all these different functions and buttons that are possible here in Media Composer. We're going to leave it on edit just for now because these are a lot of what you're going to be using to start. Now let's identify some parts to this, and these are the buttons across the bottom, and these three enable different mapping modes. So number one, we have button-to-button reassignment. So button-to-button reassignment. We're going to activate this button to remap buttons by dragging them from the command palette, this is the command palette, to the interface or the keyboard palette. So we can remap buttons from here to our keyboard or from here into our different areas on the interface. Next we have active palette. Active palette, this button is used, you can use the command palette as an editing tool itself, and you can click buttons to perform functions. So if I click active palette and then I start marking in and marking out and trimming videos, it's going to function. I can click these buttons right here. It's going to function directly and affect the whole program. So if I wanted to use this to edit, I could. I don't know why you would. It's kind of weird, but it's an option to you if you wanted to. And then number three, we have menu to button reassignment. We can activate this to map menu commands that don't have a mappable button. For example, the fill window button or fill window bin menu command. So remember when we were looking at this in frame view and we were trying to figure out, oh, what are we looking at? What is this chaos? We could map, using the menu to button reassignment, we could map that align and fill buttons directly to our keyboard using the drop-down menu and the menu to button reassignment. So that's pretty cool. All right, we'll use the command palette to remap buttons to the interface and or keyboard. More on that in a moment, but let's go to the keyboard settings. The keyboard palette displays a map of functions assigned to the keyboard's physical keys, and that's not open right now, so I'm going to open that. So we'll go to File, we can go down to Settings. Here in Settings, if we go to User and come down to Keyboard, we can we can click the drop down for keyboard because I have multiple keyboard settings, but I'm going to double click this keyboard, and now we have the keyboard open. I'm going to close this window. Now we have our command palette and our keyboard window open. So from here, we can map functions to our keyboard. A couple of notes: if you leave the command palette open, none of the buttons on the interface will be active. So if we can't use these buttons down here, we can't use these buttons while the command palette is active. So it's kind of null and void. If you hold down the shift key on your keyboard, you can map buttons to a second layer of hotkeys. For example, mapping the effect mode to shift Y, you'll use the effect mode extensively during the effects lessons later on. But what did I just say? Essentially, with the keyboard active, if I hold shift, we can see that it switches to a whole different keyboard. So I can use the shift key as a modifier to have different functions as well. So what it was saying is I could switch between my different workspaces. I could map that to my keyboard to make like Command 1 or Shift 1, Shift 2, Shift 3, the different workspaces. And I do on my other keyboard setup have it mapped that way indeed. So it makes things fun. It makes things easy. Cool. All right. What else? What else are we looking at here? So it doesn't go too in depth with how this works, but I'd like to show you a little bit more. So if I wanted to map, for instance, let's see here. What do I want to map here? I'm going to map using button-to-button reassignment. I can map my quick transitions, and this is going to make more sense to you in the future, but I'm going to map my quick transitions button. I can just drag it and drop it onto my backslash key, or forward slash key. I can never remember which direction they go, but this is what button-to-button reassignment does. I can just drag these and remap buttons on my keyboard to function these different functions here in Media Composer. And this is going to make more sense going forward. And then again, I talked about active palette, so we could use this to actually go forward and backwards. We can see I can actually use this, and this affects the program. And then menu to button reassignment. The way this works, and this is where things get kind of weird, is I believe you select a button on the keyboard. So I could select this, maybe I shouldn't do shift or option. I'm going to do shift 3. So now I've got shift 3 selected, and with menu to button reassignment selected, I can go to this fast menu. I can go to align and fill, and I could do fill window. And now we can see if I click this on my keyboard and hit shift, FW fill window is now the command for that. So if I close all this and I come over here to frame view and I hit shift 3, boom, the fill window command automatically executes for me. So it makes things a lot faster if you want to map fast menu buttons to your keyboard. So it's a quick preview because Media Composer just says, well, that's a wrap. Cool. Now you know exactly how to use these tools. And it just kind of leaves you hanging that way. So I don't want to do that to you. All right. That's a wrap personalizing the application. You review the topics covered in this section as you explore the workflows and functions that can benefit from interface customization and button remapping later. Reminder to bookmark this section so you can quickly return here to be ready to optimize your Media Composer experience and setup. So we have menu to button, active palette, and button to button reassignment. Don't forget it. Oh, also, I didn't even talk about it. Excuse me. If you want, you can drag these buttons down to your timeline. So for instance, if I wanted to add top and tail editing, I could drag these down here to my timeline. You probably don't know what these are yet. That's perfectly fine. But just to let you know, with button-to-button reassignment, we can make these edits. So you can even rearrange stuff in your timeline later if you don't like it. But yeah, there you go. So button-to-button reassignment kind of closed up there. All right. Now, last thing we're going to do for this lesson is we're going to adjust the autosave settings intervals and how to end a session. So the autosave settings do just what their name implies. They control how often Media Composer automatically saves a copy of your bins. This is your project's assets and your hard work. So this is the sequences that you edit. This is just the content for your project, how often it's going to save those to your to the computer. So Media Composer is highly stable application with few crashes. That's a lie. So I love how it blatantly lies. I'm going to read that again. Media Composer is a highly stable application with few crashes. I work on campus. We've been working with this program for years. It crashes frequently, but the better computer you have, the less likely it is to crash, and the better you work in it, the less likely it is to crash. So don't try and stress the system because it will crash on you. But even the best computers and apps crash sometimes. So if you dial in your autosave settings to the right values, you can save yourself massive stress if your system happens to crash. So let's get into how to adjust our autosave settings intervals. For this, we're going to refer to the bin settings dialog box, and the way to access that is to go to File and then Settings. And then in our User tab, it's very close to the top. We can double click bin, then we can see our autosave interval, inactive period, force autosave at, maximum files at project attic, blah, 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 blah. So I'm going to talk you through each one of these things. So notice the three values define how autosave will work. So here's what the default means. So autosave interval, Media Composer will wait 15 minutes before attempting to save. The inactive period is Media Composer will only save after you pause for at least 15 seconds. And then the force autosave at, if after 17 minutes, which is the current setup, you haven't paused for at least 15 seconds for Media Composer to save, Media Composer will interrupt you to force an autosave. So that's what these three different settings mean. The shorter period you have on this, the less work you're going to lose. So if I set this to like 5 minutes and I have an inactive period, 15, and then I do a force autosave, 10 minutes, you're far less likely to lose hard work. I mean, losing 5 minutes of work sucks because you essentially lose 10. You lose 5 in the work that you had done prior and 5 to get it back. But if you have it set to 15 or, whatever, 20 minutes, you're losing 40 minutes, it's going to be ridiculous. So don't. That's all I have to say. Don't. Okay. What's the right setting for you? It depends, but the following considerations can help you figure out what works best for you. I can just tell you should probably keep it pretty low. It's going to interrupt you to save every once in a while, but is that really a bad thing? It's not. Trust me, it's not. I know people who spent hours. My wife now, she was my girlfriend at the time. She spent hours editing a project and just didn't save. And the settings were weird on the computer. The save interval, the auto save interval wasn't set up. And she made one mistake. The program crashed and she lost hours of work. And it was the night before something was due. So don't risk it. It's not worth it. Okay, so anyway, the following considerations can help you figure out what works best for you. How fast do you edit? The faster you edit, the more work you'll complete in a given amount of time. How much you can afford to lose if the system does crash. If the system crashes just before an autosave point, you need to recreate a recent change from memory. So how good is your memory? And then how often are you willing to be interrupted? A momentary interruption may occur when Media Composer performs the save, so keep that in mind. And then are you facing a tight deadline? If you need to deliver your program within a short time frame, consider setting a short autosave interval period. For example, news stories and other things might work best if you're saving more frequently. Regardless, losing work before an autosave occurs may jeopardize your ability to deliver on time. So keep the following in mind. As you can see, there is no right or wrong answer here. I can tell you right now, there is a wrong answer. Setting this at like 30 minutes, then you lose an hour's worth of work if you lose stuff. Anyway, many editors choose to work with the defaults because that's not too much time lost. But you can dial in values you think work best and then change them as needed. As your skills and confidence increase, the right values will also change. So it's going to change for you. It's going to change for everyone. And this is all saved on your user setting, your user profile, excuse me. So if I click OK here, it's going to save to my user profile. To change your autosave settings, though, we can go to, I already just told you how to do all this. Yep, easy peasy, no problem. Cool. And when Media Composer conducts an autosave, it will not only update the bins on your project, it also creates backup copies to a folder called the attic. We're going to talk about the attic at the end of this book. We're going to talk about the attic more in the the second book. But for now, just know that this is a place where backups of your project are essentially saved. So you'll look at this folder and how to restore the bins from it at the end of this course. But for now, just know there is a place where if all is lost, all is not lost. The last two autosave options address how Media Composer manages files in the attic folder. So we can see we have maximum number of projects that we can have saved in our attic is 1,000, and max versions of the file in the attic can be 50. And you can change this. So depending on how often your system crashes, how scared you are, how nervous you are about crashes, you can change those. I leave mine at default. Those are more than sufficient to get the job done. All right, and then let's move on now to ending a session. I'm going to hit OK just to save those settings and close this. All right, ending a session. When you wrap a session and exit Media Composer, the software autosaves your work. That means ending a session takes just one quick step. To end your session and exit, do one of the following. On Windows, we can select File, Exit, or we can press Control Q. On Mac, we can select Media Composer. So we select Media Composer, and we can do Quit Media Composer, or we can hit Command Q on our keyboard. And this is going to prompt us. It's going to say, you sure you want to leave the application? And you'll hit Leave, and then boom, and you're out of the program. And that's going to do it for this lesson. Thank you guys so much for watching. To my students, I will happily see you in class. And to those of you on the internet, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.